Boom! Yes, folks, Hume again. So we continue with our series, the election, in which we discuss some of the marginal seats in Trinidad and Tobago over the past 3 to 4 election cycles. Of course, the fourth one being this one we're going to have on the 10th of August. All right. Remember, our definition of marginal for my purposes of analysis is any seat that would have changed hands at least once over the course of the 3 elections prior to this one, where we would have had 41 seats in the national setup, right? 2 in Tobago, 39 in Trinidad. All right. So we're dealing with the marginal seat of Barataria San Juan today in this video, and with this seat, we now enter in that zone where things become a lot less predictable. All right. This is the zone going forward where, even in the face of mathematical data and trends and projections, there are still some strong non-mathematical factors that we have to take into account in coming to some kind of decision one way or the other, or maybe a non-decision. We might actually come to the point of saying, well, I'm really not sure what will happen in 2020 on August the 10th. So in my own projections, I would place Barataria San Juan in the UNC column at this point in time. All right, I have some mathematical reasons why I am doing that, but in saying so, I am also acknowledging that there are some other factors there that would make this particular seat kind of harder to speculate on than some of the other seats that we would have done before. So with that being said, we're going to go straight to the graph now and kind of play up with some of the points a little bit, and then we'll come back here on the whiteboard and wrap up the discussion with a general talk. All right. So we have here the graphs for Barataria San Juan 2007 to 2015. So these are the percentages for 2007, 56.4 for the non-PNM vote, 43.6 for the PNM vote. This is 2010. They would have had 61.6% in the non-PNM vote and 38% for the PNM vote. And then in 2015, you had 51.5% in the non-PNM vote and 48.3% in the PNM vote. The projections based on the trend lines generated by these data points suggest that in 2020, the PNM would have a total of 45.4% and the non-PNM vote would be 54.9%. So in terms of the percentages, in 2015, we had the classic 52-48 election, right? You know, there are different kinds of elections when it's close. You have the 51-49, you have the 52-48. Those are generally the really, really close ones. All right. So this is a 52-48 scenario here, and this one, based on the mathematics, 2020 is shaping up to be a 55-45. All right. 55 for the non-PNM, 45 for the PNM. All right. So that is the basic outline of the maths. We're going to go back to the whiteboard now and have a little discussion. We're going to go a little more in depth into it, and you will see why we're looking at this seat as one that we're really not sure of in terms of any kind of speculation. So you would have seen the graph there. Let us now indulge in a little talk. Let us now get into some of the non-mathematical issues surrounding this seat of Barataria San Juan. All right. So we know in 2010 there was a massive anti-Manning sentiment that swept the entire country. All right. A massive anti-Manning sentiment, a massive anti-PNM sentiment, if you will. All right. And between 2007 and 2010, that anti-Manning sentiment manifested itself as an increase in the non-UNC vote of 5.2%. All right, 56.4 to 61.6. On the other side of that same coin, you saw a drop in the PNM vote from 43.6% to 38%. That's a drop of 5.6%. So while the non-PNM vote was rising by 5.2%, the PNM vote was dropping by 5.6%. So you see a kind of almost symmetric mirroring of the two parties in terms of as one go up, the other one falls, and they do so by almost the same amount. The same thing happened between 2010 and 2015. So in 2015, we had a nationwide anti-UNC, anti-Kamala sentiment. Alright, that sentiment manifested itself in the UNC voters as a drop of what, 61.6 to 51.5. That's 10.1%. So the UNC vote dropped by 10.1% between 2010 and 2015. That is a massive drop in any kind of election like this, especially for a seat in the East-West corridor. Alright? At the same time that the UNC vote was dropping off by 10.1%, the PNM vote was increasing from 38% to 48.3%. So while the non-PNM vote was dropping by 10.1%, the PNM vote was increasing by 10.3%. So again, you see that mirroring, that symmetrical dance that the two parties seem to have been doing, alright, between these three elections, 2007 to 2015. So while the UNC vote was dropping by 10.1%, the PNM vote was rising by 10.3%. Alright, will that kind of pattern hold in the 2020 election? That is left to be seen. Now there is a curious fact that I want to point out where Barataria San Juan is concerned, which is that among the seats that I would have seen so far in the East-West corridor, and I wouldn't be surprised if, when I look at all the marginal seats that are considering on the corridor, that this seat remains the only one with this pattern. Barataria San Juan is the only seat so far where there were less voters in 2015 than in 2010. Alright, so in other words, we know that every election the electorate increases. You have a number of young voters entering the fray. Alright, people turning 18 and whatnot. Alright, and I'm going to give you the exact figures. Now, the exact number of electors didn't change by much between the two elections. You know, sometimes people move, the EBC would move boundaries. They might shift a whole polling station sometimes. So in this case, the number of eligible electors in 2010 for Barataria San Juan was 25,394. And the number of eligible electors in 2015 was 25,529. Alright, so that is a difference of what? 135, right? Nothing really to talk about if you're talking about an entire electorate of 25,000 plus. However, in the face of an almost constant electorate between those two elections, you had a fall off in the actual number of people who cast votes. So in 2010, you had 17,768 people casting ballots, whereas in 2015, you had 16,938 people who cast ballots. Alright? So that suggests to me, on the face of it, that even a nationwide anti-Kamala, anti-UNC sentiment that saw the PNM basically sweep the entire East-West corridor, in Barataria San Juan, that was the exception. Right? They actually had less people coming out to vote in Barataria San Juan. So in other words, that whole anti-UNC, anti-Kamala sentiment didn't show up as PNM votes in Barataria San Juan, in the sense that you would have had UNC voters switching to the PNM. Alright? Whereas in other seats in the East-West corridor, you could clearly see, you could clearly sense, and you could clearly see from the figures and from the analysis that there would have been a certain quantum of UNC votes or COP votes or non-PNM votes that would have swung back to the PNM between 2010 and 2015. We don't have any numerical evidence of that in Barataria San Juan. Alright? And that is despite the fact that the PNM was able to register a significant increase in their voter turnout. Alright, in 2010 they would have had 6,743 people voting for the PNM. In 2015 they would have had 8,182 people voting for the PNM. That is a difference of, let me see, 81 minus 67 is 14, no, 24 or 14? 14. 1,400 and 439. 1,439. That is a difference of 1,439 votes between the 2010 and 2015. So in other words, the PNM would have increased their voter turnout by a significant amount, but still it wasn't enough to overtake the UNC in Barataria San Juan. Alright? Now, maybe they would have needed some extra help from UNC voters switching votes to the PNM. And if they had a little more help on that end, maybe they would have been able to overtake the UNC in Barataria San Juan. Alright? So that is a curious fact, because it suggests that even the people in the Barataria San Juan the people in Barataria San Juan who may be supporting the UNC, even if they are disaffected or disappointed or fed up or whatever it is, whatever negative emotions they might hold towards the UNC, that in itself is not sufficient to cause them to now go across and vote for PNM. So in other words, you have significant pockets in the Barataria San Juan seat where the UNC vote we could probably describe it as behaving like a base UNC vote in some of the UNC strongholds. So you have, we could call it UNC stronghold votes in the Barataria San Juan seats, where whatever issue there might be with the UNC, they're just not going to vote for the PNM. Alright, and the same thing happens in some PNM cases as well, right? There will be pockets of PNM support along the East-West corridor, where even if they're not voting for the PNM, they just wouldn't vote for the UNC. So it is a phenomenon that happens on both sides of the divide. It is just curious in this case to see it happening in the UNC side of things, where the UNC support behaves like a UNC stronghold vote in Barataria San Juan. So that is something that the PNM people would probably be aware of, but that is something that people generally speaking may not be aware of in terms of looking at Barataria San Juan. So what then is a possible path for victory for the PNM in a seat like this? Well, for one, we have to look at the new voters. Alright, we have to look at the new voters. The PNM will have to look at new voters coming into the fray. They definitely have to tap into the new voters. But even more than that, for the PNM to really stand a chance of winning Barataria San Juan, they have to tap into the people who don't vote, because Barataria San Juan is also one of the seats with one of the lowest voter turnouts on the East-West corridor. Alright, on the East-West corridor, based on my analysis so far, I have seen constituencies with voter turnout of 67 and 68%. In some cases, we got as high as 69 point something percent. In Barataria San Juan in 2007, the voter turnout was 66.9%. In 2015, the voter turnout was 66.3%. In 2010, however, the voter turnout was 70%. So in other words, more people went to the polls to vote out the PNM in 2010 than showed up at the polls to vote out the UNC in 2015. That is a curious fact. That is something worthy of note. Alright, so the PNM cannot expect much help from the UNC voters in Barataria San Juan. That is what the numbers appear to suggest. Alright, so there may not be much sense in trying to win over UNC voters in Barataria San Juan. Based on the evidence so far, that doesn't seem to be happening. We never know how things might be on the ground. So the PNM will definitely have to look at that. I mean, you have a whole lot of non-voters there. You have to tap into that. That is one of the ways. You have to tap into that. You can't depend on switching over UNC voters, as some people might try to do. You have to tap into the non-voters. That is the only way, really, is one of the main ways to get close to the UNC voter turnout. And even then, you still have to wait to see what would happen with the UNC vote in Barataria San Juan. The UNC vote that, from the looks of things here, may behave like a base vote in the sense that, like a stronghold vote, sorry, in the sense that even if we're not voting UNC, we're not voting for the PNM. Alright? In terms of the UNC, their party victory, they seem to have an easier party victory in Barataria San Juan. In that case, we're looking simply at turning out your votes and up in your regular voter turnout. So in other words, for the UNC to win Barataria San Juan, they have to now increase their votes. They have to get more people out. So that thing that happened between 2010 and 2015, they have to deal with that. They now have to try to convince some of these apparently disaffected UNC voters to come out and vote for the UNC in 2020. Alright? That is their political job. That is what the whole thing is about. So the political work on the ground is different for the two parties. The PNM would want to look at the non-voters. They would want to tap into as many of those non-voters as possible. UNC, on the other hand, they would want to tap in to that core of UNC / CUP / non-PNM voters in 2010, who for whatever reason didn't come out in 2015. They have to plug back into that. And if the UNC manages to plug back into that core of voters, then despite their best efforts, things may become difficult for the PNM in terms of winning Barataria San Juan. Alright? The other factor, of course, is the youth vote. We're not sure what the statistics for young people in Barataria San Juan are, but this particular election in 2020 being conducted primarily on social media as it is, you never know. That might play out in terms of young people showing up, because with the social media, with the two parties being forced to use social media in a much more extensive way than they would have had to do before, they are now able, even if they didn't actually mean to do it, they are now able to reach young people in a way that they would not have been able to do previous to now. And you never know, that might show up, that might manifest as extra youth voters in 2020, and how that youth vote swings for either party, one way or the other, that is left to be seen. So even though I am projecting Barataria San Juan in the UNC column at this point in time, I hope at this point in the discussion you have a clear sense that this is one seat that we're not too sure about. We have a lot of variables there that we just have to wait and see how it plays out. Regardless of all the punditry and talk and projections and whatever, we just have to wait for Barataria San Juan. Right? So I placed it in the UNC column just for the sake of putting it there, but we had to wait for this seat. So that is it for Barataria San Juan. And of course, as I always like to do, I will wind up this video with a short discussion of my online Road to January for CSEC Maths. People in the Barataria constituency, people in San Juan, people in surrounding areas, El Socorro, Aranguez, etc., etc. If you're doing the maths in January 2021, CSEC Maths, alright? Private student, Form 4 student going into Form 5. Form 5 student who just sat the July exam here, well, who are about to do the July exam in the abbreviated format that CXC pushed in for 2020. You know, I'm making a really strong case for that, for those Form 5s to make the extra effort and do the exam in a proper format. Do a proper exam, get a proper grade. You don't want to be in a situation at some point later on where people could question your grades. They see you get a 1 in July 2020 and the eyebrows start to furrow one time. No, we don't want that. And if there's any two subjects where you want to get away from that, it should be mathematics and English. your compulsory subjects, right? I would definitely advise anybody to do those 2 subjects over in January or maybe June 2021, and maybe any other subject that might be critical for whatever path you intend to pursue career-wise later on, right? I want to urge all the parents of Form 5 students, give very, very serious consideration to doing the exam over in January. Alright, if you have any doubts or concerns about that, you can feel free to contact me via the Facebook page. That is not a problem. Alright, you could also WhatsApp at 293-5712. Discuss that a little bit, and of course, if you want to sign up for the maths, you could fall in as well. Alright, so we have something coming up for the AdMaths students as well. People who are doing AdMaths, people in Form 5 doing the AdMaths now who will want to do it over in June next year, people who in Form 4 now and they're going in Form 5, you will want to consider that as well. Alright, so that's basically it. That is basically it. And before I go, I just want to state the price. The price is the princely sum of $500 for the rest of the year. $500 for the rest of 2020. Yes, we will raise the price a little. We'll raise the price later. But for now, coming out of the COVID, we're giving people a little blind in terms of the price. We don't want money to be a problem. Alright, so come on, get on board, sign up, and let me get this maths thing out of the way once and for all. Alright, so that's it for now. That's it. Barataria San Juan. We have more seats coming up. Stay in touch, stay tuned, stay on board, and look out. We have plenty more coming your way.